Good evening and welcome to Alan's Italy. Tonight's show is going to be focusing on the final little town, the final small central Italian town in the three-part series that we were doing. We started with Pistoia, last week we did Colle di Valdelsa, and tonight we're going to be doing the town of Citta della Pieve. And this is a very interesting story of how we wound up going there uh, during the last trip, and that in itself is a story that I'll be showing in just a moment. But let me go to the album so I could get the first image up. And this is the town. It's really an extraordinary place, and as you could see, it's a kind of a beautiful town. And but first, news from Italy. And I haven't done this in a while. This is something that I really wanted to do more often. I wanted, and I just shows are so there's so much material that sometimes I just don't have time to do something like this. But this show is will give me the flexibility in order to do that. So I thought I would, look up on the internet some of the things that are happening. I knew some of the things that were happening, but I wanted to really get an idea as to what was happening. And there's some really very, very interesting things, and I had to pick and choose. But the first thing I want to focus on is the eruption of Mount Etna. And Mount Etna erupted on October 26, 2013, and it's the tallest and most active volcano in all of Italy. And there was no evacuation that was necessary. But let me just show you where it is. This is a map of Italy, and it's in Sicily. So look all the way at the bottom, at the boot, the toe of the boot, and you could see Sicily right over there. So that's where the volcano was located. And here's a better map of exactly where Mount Etna. This is the whole island of Sicily, and this is Mount Etna, right over here. So it's very, very close to the major city of Catania, right over here. And this is what it looked like as it was just about blowing into the air, and it became quite a spectacle. This is what it looked like. It was continuing through the night, and this is what it looked like. And although it didn't cause any evacuations in Sicily per se, it did close the airspace over that part of eastern Sicily. And that town I think you see in the background there is the town of Catania, which does have a major international airport. So, that was an issue. And here, this is even an extraordinary picture. And, the pictures you got from that on the internet were really amazing because, seismologists were going right up to it. And they knew it wasn't going to be extremely serious. So, they were able to get a little more interesting vantage point than we might expect. So that was the first bit of news that occurred. The second bit of news comes from Venice and the Biennale. And I found this little tidbit, and this was posted on November 3rd, which obviously was just a few days ago, that there was an extraordinary weekend at the Venice Biennale, the 55th exhibition that I've done a series of shows on, and it has reached and surpassed a total of 400,000 visitors and sets a attendance record for Saturday, November 2nd of 7,331. I was a little surprised at that. There's a little spot on the screen I'm going to get rid of. I was a little surprised at that because it's almost the end of the Biennale. The Biennale began on June 1st and ends on November 24th. So I was a little surprised that a lot of people have waited so long to go there that would be the record. And the rest of the information on there just simply talks about what the Biennale is and was curated by Massimiliano Gioni, and the director was Paolo Barata. Okay, so that's the Biennale news. The second bit of news was sort of horrifying to me because the city of Venice gets a lot of tourists. But one of the problems that the um, administration of Venice was discussing at a meeting was that even though they get a lot of tourists, the tourists don't stay for a long time. They stay for maybe a night or 2 nights and then they're off to another part of Italy. So they were thinking of putting in an 80 million euro theme park on one of the islands in the lagoon. And this is what it would look like. And you could see that there's a Ferris wheel right there and all kinds of a wall around it. And, this is what the artist's conception of what it would look like. And to me as a tourist, this is horrifying. And I guess a lot of people would feel the same way because the beauty of Venice and the reason why Venice is so really amazing is that, it goes back 500, 600, 700 years, buildings that are hundreds of years old, and it's such an extraordinary place in its own right. Why, put a Disney World over there? So this is another bit of news. And the debate, as you could see there at the top, there was a lot of debate on both sides. The and I can't understand why people who run the city would really even want such a thing. But, they're interested in making money, and money is very important in this society. So that's another thing that's going on in Venice. This is the next thing that I chose. There were a lot of things happening, and this is what I chose. And this was the fellow, Captain Francesco Schettino, who was the captain of the ship, the cruise liner that went down off the coast of Tuscany. I believe this was last year. And, this is what he looks like as he's in the middle of his trial. So the trial is going on, and it's going on. And this was his quote when he was, on the stand, and that was, oh my God, what have I? No, this was not when he was on the stand. This was right after it had occurred. And he was, the odd thing about what had occurred was he was the first one off the boat. So this is not like the Titanic where the captain went down with the ship, or what it's meant to be. The captain always is the last person off the boat after all the passengers have been evacuated. But he was like, I don't know. Anyway, this was another bit of news. There was also some news about the trial of that American who was accused of murder in the town of Perugia, and but I chose these 4 items, and so that's the news from Venice. From Italy in general, Venice was one part of them. Here's tonight's show. Tonight's show is Alan's Italy, show number 81, and it's about the town of Citta della Pieve. And as you could see, it's a beautiful town, and here's the story. First of all, I showed this town. You may remember, if you're an avid watcher of Alan's Italy, you may remember that during show number 53, which was the Umbrian hill towns, I showed Citta della Pieve very, very briefly. This is actually, what you're looking at now on the screen is not Citta della Pieve, it's the town of Assisi. But this was the town that I showed on that particular event. And I always kind of vowed I wanted to go back. And during the last trip that we took to Italy for the Biennale that we did in May and June of 2013, we made a stop here. We made, a very, very brief stop. But here's the story of where this town comes from in our recollection. And the story begins in the town that you probably recognize as being Orvieto. And we were staying in Orvieto for the very first time in the year 2006. It was April 2006. And I had not driven very much in Italy at that point. I had driven there around Italy in 2003 for the first time, and then I didn't do any driving at all until 2006. So we were leaving Orvieto, and here's a map of what exactly occurred. I showed this map to the people at the hotel, and they told me our goal was not to go to Citta della Pieve, which is up here. Our goal was to go to the town of Todi. which I heard was a really amazing town. So the people in the hotel said when you come down out of the town of Orvieto into the Scalo area, which is the area surrounding the main part of Orvieto, which is high up, go straight and take the road to the town of Todi. Do not make a left turn and go up the autostrada. So as soon as I got down there, I did the unthinkable. This is before I had a GPS and before I was really very good at driving around Italy. And I took the detour that I was not supposed to take, and I wound up on the autostrada heading north. And I was really frustrated because I knew that in order to get to Todi over here, I would either have to figure out a way when I got off to go back or just simply go back on the autostrada and go to Todi. So we're riding along the autostrada and we get off at the exit for Perugia. This was our next stop. And I said, well, we could either go directly to Perugia and just spend a little more time there, and maybe we'll come across another town that we can, visit. So we began riding along the road to Perugia. And we passed some very, very interesting towns along the way. This is all Umbria. This is not Tuscany, like Colle di Valdelsa was that I did last week, and then Pistoia. So we're heading along some really magnificent Umbrian countryside, which is very, very much like Tuscany, as you could see. The shows that I've done on Tuscany kind of have the same view, and they kind of have the same, vineyards as well. So there's not that much different. It has fewer people for sure, but we eventually came to this town. And, it was dead ahead. And I said, gee, what is that? Isn't that a strange looking town? We had never seen a town quite, as charming and beautiful as that. And we decided that maybe we'll go there. Like we're not going to Todi, but we can certainly perhaps go to the town of Citta della Pieve. And we spent a couple of hours in this town. Not very long because I was eager to get on the road to try to find our next stop of Perugia. And as I said, I was not very experienced with driving. Okay, so we spent, a couple of hours there. We walked around. We had a cappuccino at an outdoor place, I remember. And then I said to Laura, wow, this is really something. When we get back to Florence, let's tell Luca, my friend who works at the hotel, all about this really strange town that we discovered, And we went to Florence, and we stayed at the hotel, as you could see, the usual hotel. And when we got to the hotel, we saw Luca, and we said to Luca, Luca, this is amazing. We discovered a new town. And he was looking down doing some work on the front desk that you see there. And he said, oh, really? Where were you? And I said, we went to a town by the name of, and I looked at Laura, I said, Citta della Pieve. And without lifting his head off the counter, he said, oh yeah, I go there about once every couple of months. I have a cousin who lives there, and there's a fantastic restaurant that I've eaten in many times, Taverna Perugino. And I said, you heard of this place? He said, yeah. And he looks up at me and he goes, my cousin lives there, Alan. I've been there many, many times. It's a very well-known town in Umbria. So, I sort of slinked away. I thought that I finally had gotten a place that Luca had never been to. But of course he'd heard of it. The story picks up again during the planning stages of the Biennale that Laura was involved in. And this is, of course, a picture of Laura, who represented one of the representatives of the United States at the Venice Biennale at this palazzo, the Palazzo Bembo, as you could see. And, this was shown in shows 70 through 72, all of a lot of the exhibitions that were at the Palazzo Bembo. This was the piece that she submitted that was accepted among, 300 artists. She was one of the 35 selected. And these are our friends, Barbara on the left, and our friend Barbara on the left, and Laura's cousin Barbara on the right. And we decided to, go first to Orvieto. Just as we did in 2006, we went to Orvieto, and then we were driving along the road, and we had kind of done research about this area, and we said, we'd like to show Barbara and Barbara some very interesting Tuscan or Umbrian sites. So we decided to try to find the town of Citta della Pieve. And we made a reservation at this restaurant. I then contacted Luca and I said, Luca, we're going to try to get to Citta. Could you tell us the name of the restaurant? Because I'd forgotten. And we made a reservation, and off we went on this really extraordinary trip to try to find the town. This is not the town of Citta della Pieve. This is a town we passed along the way. So we really encountered some beautiful sights. And this was a castle town. I don't remember exactly the name of the town, but it was certainly somewhere between. And I didn't take the autostrada. I immediately got onto a side road and took that all the way. So it was somewhere in the vicinity of Orvieto. And this was actually a store that we stopped in for a brief stop because we all had to kind of go to the bathroom. So we stopped here and we had something to eat, maybe some cappuccino, and then we're back on the road. And some of these pictures were taken from the car, so you could see the front windshield there. And we're going through these towns on the way north from Orvieto to the town of Citta della Pieve. And we passed some really extraordinary towns, as you could see. And you could see the road is kind of very untraveled. There were very, very few cars. It was a secondary road, maybe a tertiary road, but we were determined to go. This is a picture we took of Barbara standing in front of the amazing Umbrian landscape, going along the road, passing some extraordinary stone buildings, probably hundreds of years old. And this was a little town that we had passed. Again, I don't remember the name because we were eager to get to the town. But, real workaday towns. And they seem, you don't expect to see people in these towns. You expect it to be strictly like kind of a Disneyland thing where it's, these beautiful little towns. But, there are people going about their business, shopping in the stores and doing what they do. And there's another amazing looking building along the way. And this is the landscape that we passed on the road. And, we stopped every so often to take some pictures. And, it's very similar to Tuscany. I remember asking Luca the difference between Umbria and Tuscany, and he indicated that to him it's the same. It's just maybe a slightly different dialect. But, it's very similar, as you could see. Stone buildings, beautiful vistas, mountains in the background. It was hard for me to remove any picture because they were all so beautiful. And you could see you could see some planting down there. I'm not sure if that's an actual vineyard, but, there was wood cut up in the front for the fireplaces. And this is a really great view. This is the Umbrian countryside, probably looking out towards the east in the month of May. And this is, really an unpaved road. I try to stay away from roads that are completely unpaved because I wouldn't want to get a flat tire in one of these places, although we did have our cell phones. But these are vineyards on our way to Citta della Pieve. And you can see some really beautiful scenery there. The mountain in the background, I'm not totally sure. It could be Mount Aretino if we're looking to the east. So that could be that, but I'm not totally sure. And eventually, we came to Citta della Pieve in the distance, and this was really great because we hadn't been there in 7 years, and we vowed to return, and this was our return to the town. And these are the walls that go around the town. And you could see that the walls are very high. I'll tell you a little bit about the town in a moment when I get to the picture of it with the name. So these are some pictures as we entered the town. And this is the front gate. And do I have a picture of the actual? Yeah, okay. So so this is the front gate that, we decided to stop. I'm not even sure if we were able to bring the car beyond this point. We may have had to park the car. Usually with these Tuscan and Umbrian towns, you have to park outside and then walk through. And you could see the red sign with the horizontal white line going through it, indicating that there's no entrance into that street. And this is the view from there, looking at what we had just passed through. So this is the town of Citta della Pieve. And they have found Etruscan tombs in the area, but there was no actual Etruscan town that they found remnants of in this spot. It became a Roman outpost and was given the name of Castrum Plebis. Now, a castrum is a building or a series of structures that are used for defensive purposes, mostly in Umbria, north of Rome. And plebis means people. So this was, castrum plebis or plebis means the defensive area of the people. So maybe, it was used by the army, maybe it was used by people who were just kind of looking out for invaders along the way. And it remained a fortress until the 7th century, when they began to do some town building. It was first the town of Citta della Pieve was first mentioned by Pope Lucius III in the year 1181. And the current walls that you were looking at a few minutes ago were made in the year 1326. Most of the main building in the town that you'll be seeing in a few minutes were created between the 13th and the 16th century. And Citta was a major center for the production of bricks. During the Middle Ages, the name was changed from Castrum Plebis to the current name of Citta della Pieve, which literally is translated to mean the city of the parish church. So there was a parish church, and that's what a pieve is. It's kind of a church, but it's more of a church with a wall around it, like its own self-contained little town. And the name was given by Pope Clement VIII, who was Pope during the latter part of the 16th century. The most famous resident of the town of Citta della Pieve is Pietro Vannucci, who was better known as Perugino, who, as you could see, lived from, they're not sure, either 1446, 1450 to 1523. And he is known for a number of things. First of all, he's known because he was in the workshop. He was given his training in the workshop of Verrocchio. But in the workshop of Verrocchio, he was working alongside three very, very famous Renaissance artists, Raphael, Filippino Lippi, and my favorite, Domenico Ghirlandaio. And he is actually also famous because he has this very extraordinary painting of Jesus giving the keys to the kingdom to Peter. And that's what you see there. And this is kind of an iconographic image that appeared during the 15th century, during the Italian Renaissance. And this is a piece by Perugino that you can find in the Sistine Chapel. When the Sistine Chapel was first built, it didn't have Michelangelo's ceiling. It had a different ceiling, but it did have art around the periphery. And this is one of the pieces that you could see in the Sistine Chapel by Perugino. Okay, so we're about to enter the main town walls. And our goal is to kind of get a feeling for the town in general, but the ultimate goal was to wind up at the Taverna Perugino, which Luca indicated was one of the finest restaurants in that part of Italy. So that was our goal. And we were just kind of walking around. And this is the fortress of the town. There was always a wall around the town, and the Rocca, I think it's Rocca, was actually the fortress right in the center of the town. So that's what we're seeing now. And of course, there's a map, and right on the map it says La Città da Scoprire, which means, a town to be discovered. So it's not a real popular town. It's not like some of the famous Umbrian towns, like maybe Orvieto or Perugia, and not like some of the close by Tuscan towns, like Montepulciano and Chiusi. So this is a town that they want you to come to and kind of discover its beauty. And we indeed discovered some really, really beautiful sites. Hundreds of year old houses, beautifully built, very charming streets. And as you know, as I've mentioned many times, Laura likes to photograph doors, and this is certainly a very beautiful door in a very old building with the brick, around it in the shape of an arch. And the streets were beautiful, and we spent a lot of time just kind of roaming around the streets, taking beautiful pictures. And as you could see, this is a beautiful town, but very, very similar to many of the Tuscan towns that I've taken you to over the past couple of years. The streets actually reminded me very much of the streets in the town of Anghiari, which is not really very far away from this town. Anghiari, of course, is located in Tuscany. And look at this door with some beautiful brickwork there on the wall of that building. And, that's actually our cousin Barbara down this very, very narrow street in the town. Some of the streets were wider and had commercial establishments, and some of the streets were very, very narrow. So it was very, very interesting walking around the town. And we didn't do this the first time when we were there in the year 2006. So this was like very unique for us. And you could see at the end of the street, the trees and courtyards. And, there are still cars. So people are allowed to obviously bring their cars into the town, probably the residents, but the visitors and tourists have to leave the cars outside. And, usually locals have special parking permits. And you can see there's a beautiful campanile in the back there, part of that church that you see there. There were flags all over. And this is an outdoor restaurant. When you pass a restaurant, you kind of want to go in and take a look. And we had reservations at this other place. And of course, Luca had spoken about it. So it was our desire to get to that place eventually. This is a really beautiful church. And it's obviously very, very old. To me, it looks Romanesque with the limited knowledge I have of architecture, but I've done quite a few shows on showing you some of the churches, and to me this looks like it was probably Romanesque, from the Romanesque period. And there's that other campanile in the background with the outdoor restaurant on the right side. This is actually a cake. I wasn't sure what this was. I saw that rabbit over there on the top of it, and I wasn't sure what it is, but Laura told me that it was indeed a cake that looked very, very delicious. And it was at this point on that we decided that we wanted to get to the restaurant as soon as possible. And there's that church up close that we kept seeing the campanile for. There's actually 2 bell towers there, which is, very unusual. And of course, there were commercial establishments, a flower store, a florist. You can see all the flags and the tops of the houses in the distance. And of course, some more narrow streets with beautiful buildings flanking the street on the left and the right. And there were very, very few tourists. I'm not sure what day of the week. I think this was during the week. I believe it was a Thursday. So you could see that there were very, very few people. and certainly no tourists at this time of the year. And of course, the usual cars parked on one side of the street, just as we saw in the town of Colle di Valdelsa. If there were cars on both sides, it would be impossible to pass through. Here's another church with the front entrance. Very pretty entrance to the church. And I think we're on our way now to the actual restaurant. It was more on a commercial street. And this is the restaurant right there. And this was quite an accomplishment. When you're traveling around Umbria, it's very difficult to find anything. As I showed you when Luca had taken us to the town of Colle di Valdelsa in Tuscany, he had a very difficult time finding the address himself, and he's very experienced at traveling around Italy in general, certainly central Italy. But we, had a very difficult time finding this, but we did eventually find it, and this was the entrance to a very, very well-known restaurant in that region. And the name of the restaurant is Taverna Perugino, and there in Italian is a description of the restaurant, and the picture you see in the upper left-hand corner is the picture of Perugino. So even though this restaurant doesn't go back to the 19th century or whatever, they are famous. They want to capitalize on the fact that Perugino was born in Citta della Pieve, and they want to give you that as an introduction, and that's what that is talking about. And there are a lot of the interesting facts that I gave you about Perugino. And there is actually a picture in the restaurant, a painting of Perugino in his studio. So you could see that they're very proud of their native son. And this was the restaurant. It was really pretty, as you could see. And, we made reservations, even though it was during the week, because we wanted to make sure that if we took this very long trip to get there, that we eventually did have a table. So this is a picture of the table that we sat on. Laura took this picture from above. There were two levels to the restaurant. You walked in, and there was the main part was one step below. And this is the menu. And I vowed that I was going to take a picture of this because we must have sat for a very, very long time trying to figure out what to have. And as you could see, on the right side of the menu are all of the pizzas. And, some of them are the usual, they were very inexpensive. When you look at the very top of that, you could see pizza margherita, which is what I like the best. It's a very, very simple pizza with just red sauce, and it's only €3.90, which is a very, very good price. But you can see as you go down the list and it becomes more and more elaborate, the prices get a little higher. It was still, though, a very, very reasonable restaurant, at least for pizza. So we were looking at the right side, trying to decide whether we would have pizza or not, and yet we kept looking at the left side because we saw some really extraordinary dishes there. One of Laura and my favorite, which we began eating when we visited the town of Siena. Now, there are different pastas that are kind of germane to an area, and the pasta known as pici is more known as a Tuscan dish in central Tuscany where Siena is located, but they had that there, and we were kind of very interested in getting the number 2 dish there on the left side, pici al ragu, which is simply pici with meat sauce. So we were kind of had our heart set on that, and you could see there's gnocchi, which is one of Lydia's favorite dishes, pappardelle, which is a type of spaghetti, wide spaghetti, and all the other things along the way there. They even had steak, which of course, we didn't have, and all the salads on the bottom. I believe we also may have had a salad as well. But this is what we settled on, and we took a picture of it because I knew that I would want to show my audience. But this was the pizza that we had. And again, as I've said many times, this is very difficult because we actually got this for the table and then we just shared it because we wanted to get a number of different items. But this was really quite amazing. Let me tell you, if that looks good on the screen, it was unbelievable in person. Very thin crust, as I've shown you before, but extraordinarily delicious. This was the peachy al ragu. It's a thick pasta mixed in with ragu, and this is just unbelievable. This is, my favorite dish is pasta al ragu because I just love the simplicity, the freshness, and it's just an amazing dish. And of course, while we were in the restaurant, we wanted to take some pictures of some of the things. This is right near where the kitchen was. And this is the chef. And the chef is a fellow by the name of Massimo. And he was very, very nice and very, very accommodating to us. And this is a picture of the staff that we kind of came into contact with. And I'll give you the names. The lady on the left, the extreme left, was Assunta, who was our server. The person in the middle is the owner of the restaurant, Cristina. And of course, the fellow on the right side is Massimo, who's the chef. And they were very, very nice to us. And, we actually didn't do a videotaped interview with them. And I'm not sure exactly why. It could have something to do with the fact that they did not speak very good English. So maybe we just felt like, it wasn't a good idea. But they were certainly very kind to us. And I certainly, recommend the restaurant Taverna Perugino in Citta della Pieve. Then we left the restaurant and we began walking around the town a little bit more, headed back towards the car, and down again some very narrow streets on our way back. I believe we stopped just to rest. You walk up and down these hills in these towns and you really get tired, and there's Barbara resting at a table, and we may have had a cappuccino, I'm not sure, but this place had some unbelievably extraordinary desserts. And we had just eaten, so this was like very, very difficult. But look at those unbelievable pastries. And there's a picture of Laura and me. Now, Laura said we didn't have anything here, which is possible. We may have just stopped to rest. But since there were no tourists in the town, they didn't really mind if we sat for just a few moments. And then back on, to the main piazza. And I think this is where we had, parked the first time we were there. And this was a really amazing door that we came across. And of course, snapped a picture. And now we're just sort of headed back towards the car. How we remembered where we were parked was really amazing. And then we passed this building, which was unbelievable. This is a building that I showed earlier on, and we saw it from a distance. And we just kind of looked for this building, and we knew we were parked in close proximity. So I'm not sure exactly what this is. I believe it's a church. But as you could see, it's certainly a very, very interesting one. And then back to the front entrance. And we eventually found our car. And that's what the front entrance, looks like from a distance. And we bid farewell to a town that we had vowed to return for 7 years, and finally did indeed return to the town of Citta della Pieve. Now, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the next show. First of all, I've decided that I'm going to skip a week doing a live show, although we're going to have repeats of shows. But, in order to... I've become very busy lately because, as I've told my audience, I've started to teach again, and I've been really busy, and I don't have as much time as I used to have to develop shows. But this is one of the shows that you're going to see in 2 weeks, and this is a really interesting show that I thought of before we left the United States for Venice. And when we arrived in Venice, I said that I was going to collect a series of images and videos on what it's like taking a boat ride down the Grand Canal from the very beginning all the way to the Venice Biennale, which is around the other side of the lagoon. I'll show you on a map, for the next show what the actual route will be. But it's a series. This show is going to be a series of 5 or 6 videos of what it's like taking a Vaporetto ride, which is right there in the picture, and that's simply a water bus. I indicated that there's many ways of traveling around the town, and you could take a water taxi or a gondola or a Vaporetto, but most of the videos that I have for you are taken from a Vaporetto, and it's a very, very interesting experience. And I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but we actually, we're right up at the entrance to the Vaporetto, where we were able to videotape people getting on and getting off, and the engineer riding the boat and the person who was in charge of opening the gate. So we have some very interesting videos, and it's going to be all put together and shown in 2 weeks. So this is the 8th of November. So the show on the 15th will be a repeat of a show, and then we'll do it again on the 22nd. So that will be show number 82. And that brings us to the end of tonight's show. And I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, our return to Citta della Pieve. And I will see you in 2 weeks. And I'd like to bid you buonanotte e buona fortuna.